Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head up to Norway once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years. They're probably one of the best known Norwegian craft breweries these days, and we're going to have a look at another example of one of their signature styles today. So really looking forward to this one. It's always nice to review some Norwegian beers here on the channel. I wish that we had a bigger variety of Norwegian stuff here in Sweden, of course, so fingers crossed that happens in the future, but certainly looking forward to this, like I said, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to return to Stavanger, and we're having a look at another beer from Lervig Aktiebryggeri. So this particular beer is called Original Sin. It comes in at 13.5% ABV, and this one is being described as an Imperial double chocolate stout. So yeah, this one I think will be a bit of a monster. It's been a long time since I've had an Imperial stout from these guys actually, but they're very good when it comes to these kind of big sweet stouts actually. The last one I had I think was a collaboration with AF Brew, maybe, one of the Russian breweries. But before that, of course, I had the Conrad stout, which is probably their best known Imperial stout, and I would recommend that you have a look at that one. That's probably their kind of signature Imperial stout, if you like. But these days they're doing a lot of IPAs as well, and they do a great job with those as well. Supersonic is probably my favourite IPA that I've had from them over the last little while. But yeah, nice to return to Lervig once again. We got this beer here in Sweden as part of the Tillfällig temporary assortment through Systembolaget on the 6th of April 2021. So yeah, looking forward to this. It's a very highly rated beer, so hopefully it lives up to those recommendations that I've had, and I hope you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this beer then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Lervig Aktiebryggeri before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the fairly near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is that takes your fancy. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for the Norwegian beers that I've reviewed for, and that's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, although not as readily as I would like. I do need to try and find a Norwegian beer mule to help me out there with some different Norwegian breweries. But yeah, as always, please get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Lervig Aktiebryggeri then. So, as I've mentioned to you already, Lervig Aktiebryggeri are based in Stavanger in southwestern Norway, and the company was founded back in 2003 after the Too brewery was sold to Carlsberg and they moved the production to Oslo. But for a while, the Lervig beers were brewed at Macbull Brewery in Tromsø. However, production was moved to Hillevåg in Stavanger back in 2005. But the head brewer for Lervig is Mike Murphy, and he's been with them since 2010. Prior to this, the brewery were just brewing many light lager beers, and it was Mike that moved them in the direction of brewing the more adventurous American style beers, and he played quite an important role in the Danish craft beer revolution, and he collaborated with several renowned brewers such as Mikkel and Jeppe Bjergso of Mikkeller and Evil Twin respectively, Sean Hill of Hill Farmstead, and then Andreas Kismayer, who has done various different things in Denmark, but he was at Nørrebro Bryghus as well. But he also worked Mike also worked for Birra del Borgo in Italy, and he now owns 5% of Lervig Aktiebryggeri, which is cool, so I'm sure he'll be there for the foreseeable future. But the CEO of the company is Anders Kleistrup, and he and the main owner of the brewery was originally Christopher Stensrud, who owns 67% of the shares. And from what I understand, he was actually investing money in the company for a long time at a loss, and it was only after a good few years of operations that the brewery managed to break even and turn profit, which is pretty impressive. But in 2018, Orkita Capital, who also own part of Mikkeller, bought 50% of the company, and they're helping them to expand. So this is one of the reasons why Lervig have been really putting up their output, if you like, over the last few years. But they're also hoping to open a new facility called Ulhelene in Stavanger at some point fairly soon. So hopefully I can go to Norway and have a little look at that. I do need to get up there and explore Norway a little bit more, because it's just it's somewhere. I know it's very, very beautiful. I've only ever been to Oslo, and I would like to explore that a little bit more. But Lervig actually export around 1/3 of their beer, and in total the brewery apparently exports around 15% of all of the beer that's exported from Norway. So that is pretty damn impressive, I have to say. And as of April 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced around 215 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. Like I said to you earlier, Lervig Aktiebryggeri are known as they're one of the best known Norwegian craft breweries out there these days, along with the likes of Amundsen. And you know, the other breweries you're quite likely to find would be Handbryggeriet, you know, Servicium you can find in quite a few places as well. But yeah, probably Lervig and Amundsen are the best known Norwegian craft breweries these days. You can find them all across the world. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Lervig Aktiebryggeri just now. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on and have a look at this beer. Really curious to see what this one has in store for us. But as you can see, the artwork on this one is very, very nice. You know, you always get good artwork from Lervig Aktiebryggeri. This is a 330ml can, which is typical of their Imperial Stouts. They always sell them in 330ml. The IPAs tend to come in the 440s, of course. But yeah, as you can see, really nicely presented. I think it looks like it's flowers, basically. And the Lervig guy just kind of chilling with the rainbow over him, the light prism, basically, which looks pretty cool. But yeah, 13.5% Imperial Stout. This one, an Imperial double chocolate stout with vanilla and cocoa nibs added into the brew. So yeah, this should be a little bit of a monster there. You can see the Lervig Aktiebryggeri symbol. I think I showed you that a second ago though. This beer cost me about 80 Swedish kroner if I remember rightly, so that's roughly about €8, about £7.25, something like that, and maybe about $9.25, $9.50 American, something like that. So yeah, it is a Norwegian beer. You will pay a little bit more for these. You need to pay 10 kroners extra in Sweden, of course, for the import fee through Systembolaget. But yeah, Norway, very strong currency, high labour costs, so if you want to drink Norwegian beers like Finland and Denmark, you are going to pay a little bit more for these. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this has in store for us. And this is my first stout from Lervig in well over a year. As I say, I think the last one was it called Fear of the Zafir? Maybe. Something like that. But yeah, that was the last stout I had involving Lervig Aktiebryggeri. So yes, and this one is not retaining its head at all. But at 13.5%, that's not unheard of, to be honest with you. Just checking that this one is nice and straight for my OCD, of course, as we do. I always like to make sure things look nice on the camera, but there we go. So you could see when this beer poured, it did have a nice little foamy ring around the edge of the glass there, and I would say it was, you know, a kind of fawn colour. It wasn't even a particularly dark tan, as you can sometimes get from these big Imperial Stout beers. But yeah, as far as Imperial Stouts go, the appearance of this one is pretty much what you could expect. You can see it's a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the surface there. But I mean, overall, it looks very nice. When you actually sugar it around, you can see there's little bits of carbonation just around the edge of the glass there. I think you guys can see it on the camera. You can also see yourselves in the little viewfinder. But yeah, it does look very nice actually. And you can see, if you shine the light through this one, you can see it's actually quite a hazy stout. It's got quite a bit of oats. And it does, by the looks of it, does say, does it have wheat in it as well? No, but yeah, vanilla and cocoa nibs anyway, it just says oats. So yeah, not surprising that this is a big hazy beast. If you shine the light through it, you do get a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi Max sort of edge to it. But yeah, one or two big bubbles towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, or the surface I should say. But overall, it looks very, very nice. And when you sugar this up, you can see how boozy it is, because just look at that kind of lacing stuff that it leaves on the edge of the glass. But as far as Imperial Stouts go, this one has really nothing that's very surprising when it comes to the appearance. So yeah, the head disappeared as you would expect from a 13.5%er. So yeah, let's have a little look at the aroma of this one then and see how we get on. Very curious about this. Oh, that smells pretty damn good actually. Yeah, this is going to be a nice beer, I'm pretty sure of that. So it's very, very nicely balanced. I mean, it's definitely a sweet stout, this one. You can tell that right away. I don't know if this was actually termed a pastry stout or exactly what, but it's an Imperial double chocolate stout, as we've said. So probably in this kind of day and age, if you like, it's going to be an Imperial pastry stout. But yeah, when you smell this beer, straight away you get some of that. You do get a nice little bit of toasty malt out of it, but you smell the big, sweet, chocolatey notes right on top of that right away. So yeah, where do we start with this? Yeah, so the backbone of the beer is definitely a little bit of a kind of toasty bread crust, but on top of that you can kind of smell, how thick this beer is. I think there is a bit of lactose in this, just kind of smoothing it out, and you've also got a wee bit, you can smell the oatiness in this. Does this beer actually have lactose in it? Oh no, it doesn't. Okay, no, it is just it is actually just, I really would have thought from smelling this one it had lactose in it, but apparently not. It is just oats in it. So all of that big smoothness and thickness you'll be getting will be from the oats. My mistake. So yeah, you can smell that backbone of the beer just being smoothed out by the oats, and on top of that you've got a whole host of chocolate and things in there. So there's a bit of brown sugar in this beer as well, but yeah, you can smell it's a very milky chocolate that you get out of this one. You know, a sort of 50% cocoa, if you like a very kind of, although milk chocolate's actually a little bit lighter than that, so maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's about a 40% cocoa chocolate that you're getting out of this. There are a few elements of a darker chocolate in there, and you can tell that, the slightly stronger cocoa notes and a little bit of a more kind of slightly red, dark red fruity sort of thing, but there's a lot of a kind of milky, creamy chocolate coming out of this one. You definitely get a few nutty undertones in there. The vanilla is most definitely there as well, and you know, it's all just, it goes together very, very nicely, this one. It comes across as like big and oily and silky in terms of its aroma. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting combination of things that's going on with this beer. Absolutely. Yeah, I certainly like this one, I have to say. So thumbs up to Lervig in terms of the aroma. But you know, from past experiences, I know that these guys are very capable in this particular style category. But yeah, toasty, slightly toasty bread crusty backbone, smooth oats kind of sitting on top of that. Some of the vanilla comes out there as well. A few woody and nutty undertones in there. Then you've got this whole mix of chocolate. You get a sweet caramel. You get a sweet caramelly note out of this as well. You do get a kind of treacly molasses sort of thing, some sweeter caramel, and then also more of a kind of toasty element to it as well. You get a little bit of a kind of more toasty, almost slightly salty caramel note out of this beer as well. But underneath that, you've got all these chocolate notes, and like I say, there's a mix of milk chocolate in there. There's a mix of milk chocolate in there. There's a bit of darker chocolate as well, and you know, it just works really, really well actually. The chocolate comes across, there is a wee bit of that kind of powdery, charred chocolate element to this one too, but you know, when they're calling it an Imperial chocolate stout, you're going to get a bit of everything in there. Absolutely, that's not a surprise to me at all. But it's a really beautiful smelling beer, I have to say. I really like how this one goes about its business. So yeah, awesome stuff. On the hoppy side of things then, let's just see about that. You do get a little bit of hoppiness out of this beer for sure. Obviously a stout is a more malty leaning beer, stating the obvious. But yeah, you do get a little touch of earthiness out of this one. There's a good little bit of floral aromaticity as well, and you've also got a good wee bit of a grassy note in there. So the green components obviously take a back seat to the malty side of things. That's kind of a given, to be honest with you. But yeah, it just it makes sense. So you do get, you know, the longer you age this beer, of course, the more you're going to get, the more these hoppy qualities are going to drop out of it. But you certainly do get a nice little bit of how do you say, you certainly do get a nice little bit of a green component out of this one. So yeah, I think this works very, very well. So yeah, it just adds a little bit more depth to the beer for sure. I wonder if it's a little bit Chinook or something that's in this, or exactly what it is. There's just something very familiar about it. Maybe a little bit of Cascade, a little bit of Chinook, something like that going on with this one. It's quite a familiar hop. So yeah, earthiness, good little bit of a kind of floral aromaticity to the beer for me, and then some a few little bits of grassy zestiness as well. But the fruity side of the beer is certainly very, very nice. So we'll concentrate on that now. Yeah, I get a good little bit of a raisiny character out of this one. You get some kind of plummy notes in there as well. The more I smell of this beer, the more it smells a little bit like kladdkaka, which is, you know, basically Swedish chocolate cake. It's almost like a brownie, but, you know, a bit softer, to be honest with you. You get a little bit of that. You can smell that kind of in behind the fruity notes, so definitely a little bit of raisin on top, a little bit of a kind of more oily plum underneath, and then you get some figgy elements to it, some black currants, and a good little bit of an oily blackberry type vibe out of this one. So I really like how this beer goes about its business. I think it's very very nicely done. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer, I think, it's got a little bit of sharpness, it's got a bit of juiciness to it, and it has got a wee bit of an oily character as well. So yeah, definitely take a little bit of time and just ponder over the aroma of this beer before you actually taste it, because there's some really interesting stuff going on here. It's not anything unusual, but it just smells very, very nice. And I always say that half of the experience with craft beer and whiskies and stuff like this is the aroma. So yeah, do that, definitely do that. But let's have a taste of this one then. This one is the Original Sin, a 13.5% Imperial double chocolate stout, as they're calling it, from Lervig Aktiebryggeri in Stavanger in southwestern Norway. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Damn, that is very, very nice. I'm just going to say straight away, thumbs up to Lervig for this. That's a damn good stout. Hard to say whether this is my favourite one that I've had from them, because it's been such a long time since I've had one, but I'll just say that's a beautifully executed beer. Awesome stuff. It's very well balanced as well. First impression is you do get a bit of that roasty toasty element to it. Lets you know, yeah, this is an Imperial stout. And in fairness, what I would say is that, you know, Nerd Brewing from here in Skåne in the south of Sweden, they've really made me appreciate that little bit of roasty toastiness that you should have in every Imperial stout, I think. There's a lot of stouts these days that are just, you know, really massive and sweet and things like that, and they don't have any roasty toastiness to them. But I just like having that bit of roasty toastiness to give you some depth and sort of ground the flavour almost. And you do get a bit of that out of this one for sure. But it's straight away on one sip of this you can tell it's a lovely beer. So well done to Lervig for this. This is awesome. But yeah, straight away with this beer then you get a really nice you see, you get a bit of that roasty toasty bread crust, you know, you can feel that just blanketing the middle of your palate there, and it sits there. It does come out a little bit more into the aftertaste. There is a bit of woodiness in that very base layer of the beer as well, which I think gives it another little bit of depth. But yeah, toasty, well-fired bread crust in there, but not too dry. Definitely not too dry. And you get a thin layer of a sort of brown bready kind of thing sitting on top of that as well. So toasty, well-fired bread crust, a little bit of an almost brown bready element sitting on top there, and then as you move further forward in that middle third of your tongue, you'll get a few woody elements there. And if you go to the very centre of your palate and just follow the line of your tongue forward, you will get a kind of nutty element to this one. I think the nut is actually quite prominent in this beer. You do get quite a nice wee nutty character to this beer, which I think works very, very well. But yeah, that's the backbone of the beer, and it works very, very well. Sitting on top of that, of course, that's when you can feel the oatiness coming into play and just smoothing out all of that base layer and sort of laying the way for the chocolate And within the oaty layer, as you move towards the kind of front half of that middle third of your palate, you can feel the vanilla coming out of this beer as well. I think the vanilla sort of promotes some of the milkier chocolate flavours in this. We'll come to that in a minute. And it also promotes a little bit of that nutty flavour that the beer has as well. So again, like a lot of stouts, this is very, very layered, this beer for me in terms of its flavour. And I really like how that goes together. So yeah, backbone of bread crust, a little bit of brown bread sitting on top of that, and you've got a woody, nutty thing in there as well. Then you get that oaty layer with a bit of kind of vanilla sitting in it, and then on top of this, you've got the chocolate. So yeah, in the centre of your palate, you've almost got like a kind of circle there, and that's where the kind of epicenter of the chocolate is. And for me, if you go into the very centre of your tongue, that's when it is kind of, for me, that's when the chocolate is kind of at its milkiest. So in the very centre of your palate, you'll get a sort of 40% cocoa chocolate there. That's when it's at its milkiest. And as you move further out from that, the chocolate starts to get a little bit sort of drier, if that makes sense, and you start to get the more dark, you start to get those darker, higher cocoa chocolatey elements out of it, which is very nice. So yeah, I really like that chocolatey element to this beer for sure. It works very, very well. I just like the depth of the chocolate that this beer has. It goes from being really, really kind of rich and silky and milky in the middle of your palate, and as you move further out, it just gets darker and darker and darker. And eventually at the very edge of the palate, it's almost like a kind of slightly charred chocolate actually, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, that's your chocolatey element for you. But then on top of that kind of chocolate in the very centre of your palate, that's when you get the brown sugary elements there. And the brown sugar is quite interesting because there is a little hint of that highly caramelised treacle molasses sort of thing in this one. And remember that a big stout beer like this is going to undergo a boil of 6 hours or something like this, 5-6 hours. Very long boil these beers tend to be, and that caramelizes the sugars more and more. That's one of the reasons why these beers are so dark, but then it depends on the type of malts you use anyway. But in the very centre of your palate, you get a highly caramelized, treacly sort of flavour there, and as you move further out from that, it starts to become a little bit lighter and kind of caramelly, if you like, and then towards the very edges of the palate, as you move further out from that, it develops a slightly toasted caramel element, which I really like. You don't really get a biscuity note out of this beer, which you can sometimes get in these sort of stouts. And I think, to be honest, on the basis of the flavour that we've got out of this beer, I think it's fair to call this a pastry stout. I don't think there's much doubt in my mind about that actually. But yeah, this beer I think goes together very, very nicely in that middle third of your palate. And of course the middle third of your palate is where you get the most complexity on the malty. Yeah, on the malty kind of beers like this. But yeah, I think we can leave the middle third of your palate at that. But on the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of an almost like chocolate brownie sort of thing builds up there. You get a wee bit of toastiness in it as well. And as you go on to the back third of your palate, that's when you get a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty note again. But in fairness, I think there's a little bit of the oats kind of spilling over that and just smoothing it out too. So you get a bit of a kind of toasty bread crust and a bit of brown bread sitting on top of that, and then you can feel those slightly more airy, yeasty esters coming out in this one as well, which I think works really, really well. So yeah, if you start at the back of your palate, the flavour is kind of like this, a little bit taller, and as you go forward, you can feel it gradually just kind of sort of condenses down, and as you reach that border between middle and back third of your palate, it sort of condenses down quite a lot, and then the middle third of your tongue is really quite thick, and the flavours are quite dense in that case. But yeah, it certainly works very, very well. But in terms of the hoppy side of things then, I think we've covered the malty and yeasty aspects of the beer as much as we need to. The hops are kind of what you would expect. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little touch of earthiness there, and as you move further forward, the earthiness does come forward a little bit. There's a wee tiny element of herbal quality there, but as you move further forward, it gradually becomes a little bit more kind of floral. Yeah, a little bit more floral. I was going to say piney for a second there, but not really piney in fairness, but it's quite smooth as you move further forward on the sides of the palate there. So I really like how that goes together. But yeah, around the front curve of the tongue, there's definitely a little bit of a grassiness there and a tiny little bit of zestiness. Remember, this is an Imperial Stout. It's not the most hop-forward kind of beer. I'm not sure exactly when this one was canned or how old it is, and the longer you hold on to a beer like this, the more the hoppy character is going to drop out of it. That's kind of a given. But yeah, the hops in this one just add a nice little bit of depth to the flavour, I would say. But let's focus on that front third of your palate where you get those nice juicy fruity esters out of the beer. So yeah, on the border region again, between front third and middle third, you've got that kind of Cladcooka, big chocolate brownie sort of thing there, and there's a bit of toastiness to that. Then the base of the front third of your palate has a sort of soft chocolate cakey kind of thing underneath it as well. And then on top of that, you've got that oily bubble where the juicy esters from the hops just roll their way out of the beer. So the fruity side of things then, it's quite similar in that sense to what you would expect from the aroma. So when you take the beer in, you get a little bit of a raisiny sharpness out of it. Underneath that, there's some juicy plums. I do get a little bit of a kind of, you know, daty, pruny sort of thing in that. But as you move further forward from the back of that front third of your palate to a more kind of figgy element to the beer, you do get a little bit of that. And then as you push onto the front half, as you push on to the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, you do get a little bit of a kind of black curranty, slightly more juicy element sitting underneath. But there's also a little bit of an oily blackberry sort of thing kind of sitting on top of it, which is nice, and that gives you a wee bit of juiciness going in further into the aftertaste. So yeah, it could be a little bit of Chinook that's been used in this. Eureka would be another option, I guess, but I'm not sure exactly what hop they would have used in this one. But the fruits that you get out of this beer are very, very nice, and they sort of mix with the kind of cakey vibe that you get out of it. I think this beer does get a little bit more toasty and roasty the further you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, I think that's nice. It does let you know, yeah, this is an Imperial Stout. It's a sweet Imperial Stout, but it's still an Imperial Stout. I think you've got to have a wee bit of toastiness in these beers for sure. But yeah, I like how this one goes together. A bit of raisiny note to it, a bit of kind of plummy note, some figgy, some juicier figs and black currants, and then a bit of blackberry too. So I really like how this one goes together in that sense. So big thumbs up for this one to Lervig. I think they've done an awesome job of this, but we know they're very good in this style. Let's round off the review with a look at the mouthfeel then. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that this is a full-bodied beer. I think you'd be kind of silly to suggest otherwise. It is a big full-bodied thing. The carbonation is very, very smooth in this one. It's very silky, very thick and very oily, which you'd kind of expect for an Imperial Stout. So yeah, I really like how it goes about its business, this beer. In terms of IBUs and things, I think this beer does have a fair wee bit of bitterness to it. I wouldn't be surprised if this one underneath is about 50 IBUs, something like that. I think you do, the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, you really get some more toasty elements pushing their way out of this. But the malty side of the beer is very smooth, it's very thick, and it does have a wee bit of a toasty charriness to it, which I think is quite interesting as well. But yeah, the malty base is really well balanced, and it's got a lot of depth to it. I really like how that goes together in this beer. But yeah, I think it works very, very nicely. In terms of the fruity side of the beer, like I said, it's quite oily. It has a little bit of sharpness in the beginning, but then it develops a little bit of juiciness, and I get more and more cakiness out of this beer the more that I drink of it as well. But I think in summary, it's just a beautifully executed beer, and now it feels like a shame that I've not had a stout from Lervig Aktiebryggeri in such a long time. So well done to them for this one. If you can get a hold of this beer and try it, I think you will certainly enjoy it. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. I'm going to go and sip away on this one for the rest of the evening. I think this is definitely a sipper, this beer, rather than than one to kind of just chug, if you like. But yeah, let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Lervig Aktiebryggeri as well. Let me know some other Norwegian breweries that I should check out, because I know There's many more of them opening up there, and I would love to review Norwegian beers a little bit more regularly on the channel. But this one was the Original Sin, a 13.5% Imperial double chocolate stout, as they're calling it, from Lervig Aktiebryggeri in Stavanger in the southwest of Norway. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next review. Slange, skål, cheers, see you soon.